You're watching the Daily Climate Show on Sky News. Coming up on today's programme, contaminated with sewage, slurry and plastic. A damning report by MPs says only 14% of England's rivers are in a good ecological state. The world's 6th warmest on record. US scientists say extreme weather events from heat waves to floods are linked to global warming. And the call for the world's biggest companies to do more to tackle deforestation. Hello and welcome to the UK's only daily climate news show, where we track the changes happening to our world right now and challenge those coming up with the solutions. And we start with a worrying report on England's waterways, which has found that the vast majority of rivers contain a chemical cocktail of sewage, slurry and plastic. The Parliamentary Environmental Audit Committee says only 14% of the country's rivers have a good ecological status, and that the water regulator could do more to tackle the companies responsible. Well, in a moment, I'll be speaking to one of the members of that committee, but first, here's Fraser Maud's report.
Virtually all of England's rivers now contain a chemical cocktail of sewage, slurry and plastic. So says a damning report by the Environmental Audit Committee into the state of our waterways. Only 14% of English rivers meet good ecological status, and none of them can be given a clean bill of health for chemical contamination.
Frankly, for the last 60 years, because our drainage and sewerage systems are all underground, out of sight, we've not invested in water treatment to cope with the increased investment in what's been happening above ground.
The Environment Minister, Rebecca Powell, says we are going further and faster than any other government to protect and enhance the health of our rivers and seas. We welcome the EAC's report, she says, which highlights many areas that this government is now tackling. You don't have to look too far for evidence of pollution. Here on the River Tame, there are bits of plastic and debris scattered all along the riverbanks. But it's not the plastic that you can see that makes this one of the most polluted rivers in England. It's the plastic that you can't. This microscopic image shows tiny plastic beads and fragments collected from the bed of the River Tame.
The best way to keep microplastics out of rivers is to treat the wastewater.
Yeah.
Simple.
Professor Jamie Woodward collected the microplastics, which he says can only have come from untreated wastewater.
If wastewater is released from wastewater treatment works, from sewage treatment works into river systems under dry weather conditions, under low flows, those microplastics will accumulate on the channel bed, and they're often marinated in sewage.
The report has over 80 recommendations, including better funding of the Environment Agency, stricter monitoring of water companies and stronger punishments for those who break the rules. Fraser Maud, Sky News, Manchester.
Well, joining me now is Sir Robert Goodwill, who's part of the Environmental Audit Committee. Welcome to you. So your committee found that just 14% of rivers in England are high quality. It's pretty shocking, isn't it? How have we got to this point?
Yeah, it's very grim reading. And indeed, much of the emphasis in the past has been about bathing water quality. So, in my constituency, we've done a lot to clean up the outfalls into the sea. But the rivers, I think, have been largely ignored. There's multiple problems. We've talked about microplastics. There's problems with runoff from agricultural land. But also we've seen a lot of development which hasn't really been kept up with by the water companies in terms of sewage treatment. The committee went onto the River Windrush in Oxfordshire, and the water looked like sort of one of those colours in the Farrow and Ball catalogue. There was nothing in there; it was dead. And we really need to catch up and invest in better water treatment. And indeed, as people nowadays seem to want to maybe swimming in rivers a little more, we need to make sure we have safe bathing water for people who swim in rivers as well as the sea.
What about investment in the Environment Agency? I mean, your committee condemned outdated, underfunded and inadequate monitoring of river quality. How much were budget cuts there responsible, do you think?
Well, that has an effect on them, but the water companies themselves should be testing, and we have much better equipment now for testing in real time, and we have community groups who are doing the testing for them, and I think the report looks at how they can be engaged to actually do more in terms of feeding in that information. But yes, it's a pretty grim reading, and really we need more investment. We need the opportunity. For example, we also recommend that if water companies don't perform, then the bonuses, some of the big bonuses paid to their executives should be looked at as well. So, I think it's about as hard-hitting as it could be, is this particular report.
Well, how much difference do you think that the government's environment bill will make to protecting our rivers? Because there are a number of environmental campaigners. There's also a number of peers in the House of Lords as well who just say the bill's too lenient on water companies.
Well, I think we do need to realise that this will take some time. And one of the problems is stormwater overflow. So when it's very heavy rain, quite a lot of our country, particularly the older housing, have combined outfall. So, the rainwater goes in the sewer and that completely overflows and inundates the sewage treatment work. So we do need more investment in stormwater tanks so we can catch this stormwater and then treat it later. But yeah, I think certainly the Duke of Wellington's amendment, I think, was very ambitious, but I think it didn't take into account the fact that it will be the consumers who will pay for this through their water bills and through their sewage charges. We need that investment to be rolled out, but we do need better information, more monitoring, and looking at, for example, the whole issue of microbial resistant. A lot of these pathogens going into the rivers, when we have these overflows, can help build those sort of diseases that people, can't be treated with conventional antibiotics to cure. So, there's some very real issues. And also, of course, we've got the problem in towns of people putting, fatbergs, putting the fat in the drain and combined with wet wipes. That creates those massive fatbergs, some as big as a blue whale. So, there's a lot of, I think there's responsibility in some cases on people who are putting things into the water system that they shouldn't, which does make the work of the water companies even harder.
Well, Sir Robert Goodwill, we appreciate your time. Thanks very much indeed for joining us tonight.
My pleasure.
Now, last year was the 6th warmest year on record, contributing to extreme weather events around the world. These include the dramatic heat wave in the Pacific Northwest of America and flooding across Europe and China, according to experts at NASA and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration in America, who put together this research. Well, this animation shows analysis by NASA's Goddard Institute for Space Studies of the world's surface temperature. Now, it shows the anomaly in global temperatures using the Land Ocean Temperature Index, or LOTI, against a baseline average measured over 30 years. Now, that all sounds very technical, but what we can see clearly is that after 1970, the world has been warming up, shown by the increase in yellow. And in recent years, several areas are actually quite red, which indicates 3 or more degrees over their reference levels. Well, our US correspondent Martha Kellner joins me now from Washington. So, Martha, yet another report showing just how warm the world's becoming.
Yeah, some very stark but perhaps not unexpected findings from this report. It is, as you mentioned, a joint report by 2 US government agencies, NASA, which most people will have heard of, and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which measures the heat of the world's oceans, among other things. The report confirms what many people would anecdotally suspect, and that's that the world is gradually warming and it's causing increasing frequency of these extreme weather events. It found last year, as you mentioned, was ranked as the 6th warmest on record. And we've seen in our reporting the impact of climate change across the globe. We've reported on this side of the world from extreme heat waves on the western side of Canada and the western states of the US. We've reported from California, where entire towns have been razed to the ground by wildfires. We've also seen the devastating impact of flooding in Germany and other parts of Europe, and also a series of hurricanes across the Atlantic. And Gavin Schmidt, the director of NASA's Institute for Space Studies, who were involved in this report, said their analysis added to evidence that global warming is very real, it's now, and it's impacting real people. The report also looked at so-called billion-dollar weather events. That's weather events which have caused $1 billion of damage or more. And it found that in 2021, that there'd been the second highest number of these so-called events, on record. You may remember Hurricane Ida and the devastating destruction that caused across Louisiana. The tail end of that hurricane even impacted New York and New Jersey as well. It found that had caused $75 billion or 55 billion pounds worth of damage, making that event the most costly this year in the United States.
Martha, thanks very much. In some of today's other climate news, energy experts say the UK's gas grid will be able to deliver a 20% blend of hydrogen to households across the country by next year. Energy Networks Association, the trade body of network companies, said using hydrogen is a cleaner and more secure source of energy, which could significantly lower household emissions. Currently, around a third of household emissions come from heating. 30 multinational companies are being targeted by the same group of activists who won a landmark court ruling against Shell last year. Friends of the Earth Netherlands has asked the companies to provide plans outlining how they'll cut their emissions by 45% from 2019 levels by 2030. They've warned that a failure to do so may result in legal action. China has released a sustainability report which outlines its efforts to make the Beijing Winter Olympics a low-carbon event. The report includes measures such as reusing venues from the 2008 Olympic Games and powering stadiums using renewable electricity. Critics have raised concerns over the environmental cost of a Games which will rely on artificial ice and snow. Now, some of the world's biggest companies and institutions are failing to tackle deforestation despite a commitment from 141 global leaders at the COP26 summit last November to halt or reverse the practice. Destroying the world's forests is a major contributor to increasing carbon emissions, causing global warming and climate change. So here's a reminder of what some of those leaders said back in Glasgow.
Leaders have come together representing over 85% of the world's forest estate. They've made a landmark commitment to work together to halt and reverse deforestation and land degradation by 2030. Not just halt, but reverse.
Today I'm announcing a new plan to conserve global forests, which will bring together a full range of U.S. government tools, diplomatic, financial, and policy.
This $3 billion in pledges will drive a new threefold nature agenda.
Faço chamado a todos os países para que ajudem a defender todas as florestas.
There is no valuable future without the tropical rainforest.
Frankly, we've all had enough talking, so we need to put our words and commitments into practice.
Well, the annual Forest 500 report of 350 companies and 150 financial institutions finds that 1/3 of companies whose activities are having most effect on deforestation have no commitment to reduce their impact. 72% have no commitment to tackle the problem in their supply chains. Now, just 26% of companies and 21% of financial institutions recognise that deforestation is a risk to their business through its impact on climate change, water supply or biodiversity loss.
These companies need to start with the basics, get a policy, a clear and transparent policy in place so that groups like ours and the world, the companies that have made these commitments, the governments can see that companies in their jurisdictions are taking this issue seriously. They then need to engage suppliers and set them deadlines to improve traceability and to take action on this issue. And they need to report transparently on their progress. No one should stay under the radar. And this is an issue that nobody wants. Consumers don't want this. And so all of us as voters, as pension holders, we need to keep the pressure up on our banks, our supermarkets and our politicians.
Do stay tuned. Coming up next, I'll be joined by Chidi Oti-Obihara, co-founder of COP26 Action Plan Group and former Energy Secretary Amber Rudd. And we'll be discussing the two biggest issues facing the country today, politics and energy. Hello and welcome back to the Daily Climate Show on Sky News. Now, we're getting straight to discussing the climate issues of the day now with Chidi Oti-Obihara, co-founder of COP26 Action Plan Group and former Energy and Climate Secretary Amber Rudd. So very good evening to both of you. Good to see you both. Now, today, we're going to discuss two of the biggest issues facing the country today, which in turn are inextricably linked to climate issues, politics and energy. And Amber Rudd, you're perfectly placed to speak about both of those. First of all the controversy surrounding Boris Johnson, calls from some within the party for him to step down. You were a Tory MP for many years, so what do you think? Should he go?
Well, the thing about Boris Johnson is that what he surprised many of us about is addressing dangerous climate change one of the top things in his agenda. So he has been very pro, particularly for a Conservative government, if I may say, at addressing climate change, addressing the key subject that we've just seen about deforestation, and leading on hosting COP26. So I find it very disappointing, like many people do, shall I say, to put a mild spin on it, that the Conservative Party is so wrapped up again in its own internal fighting about what should happen next with Boris Johnson, rather than getting on with what we have in hand, which is a climate emergency, some need for new legislation and some new leadership on this subject.
So does that mean you don't want to call for him to go? You don't want to comment on it? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Anna, it's not for me. I'm no longer a politician. I'm sort of active in the private sector now and trying to work with NGOs like the Climate Group to try and make sure that we get the right policies in place to address climate change. But one thing I would say is I haven't always been a huge supporter of Boris Johnson's, but he has been clear about wanting to address climate change and put in policies which, for a Conservative government, have been very, very supportive of trying to do that. So I hope that they will last, whatever the outcome is.
OK, so Chidi, what do you think? Whether the Prime Minister goes or not, do you agree that this is a distraction? And if he were to go, what impact do you think that could have on climate policies? I mean, he's already under pressure, isn't he, from some Tory backbenchers over energy price rises and the role of green levies in energy bills. Do you think his departure would give those voices more sway?
I think that it's not a viable thing to say, to assert that Boris Johnson is somehow the great green Conservative. He's not. He's made several mistakes, and the policy positions he's set out have been challenged, now currently being challenged in the courts by Friends of the Earth and Client Earth. The fact that global oil and gas markets are in turmoil has only amplified the fact that the policy solutions that Boris Johnson's government has come up with are not viable ones. They don't work, and they haven't stuck to the core principles that sit behind many of the demands that the people on the green end of the spectrum have made. So we, for example, the COP26 Climate Action Plan, asked that the UK government show a lead in banning all new fossil fuel finance and following that through at COP26 in November in Glasgow. That hasn't happened in an explicit and complete way. And the rest of the world has watched us stumble through this process and now are watching us go through this really undignified process of scrambling through lockdown processes that we set out, we broke. It's disgraceful.
So, Amber Rudd, let's pick up on that issue over investment in oil and gas. When you were Energy Secretary, you were keen to push gas as a transition fuel, weren't you? But we're now seeing soaring gas prices. They're behind a huge projected rise in people's bills. So was it a mistake to promote gas?
No, and we need gas. I mean, in the future, we will have renewable energy and I hope batteries and possibly hydrogen. So we won't need as much, if at all, gas one day in the future. But right now we need gas. And we're seeing at the moment this huge demand for gas. And it is demand Chidi's quite wrong, not the recent policies that are affecting the price of the gas that consumers are having to pay at the moment and are going to have to pay even higher when the price cap reflects that in April. Gas is a transition fuel. We need it at the moment, and we should not go around saying that we can stop it at a cliff edge. Most people describe what we're going through as a transition. That means that we need the gas in order to get to a place where we can let go of the gas. But that is many, many years ahead. At the moment, we should be extracting gas, and we should do it in a way that is clean as possible, that is as efficient as possible, but hopefully will help build the energy security, not just of the UK, but of Europe as well. To be totally dependent on Russian gas would be such a mistake.
OK, we need gas then, Chidi, for the transition to renewables, but also for energy security.
Amber is making a very classic mistake. asking for no new fossil fuel projects is not the same thing as asking that we turn off the taps immediately. It's saying that investing in a stranded asset that adds to the world's carbon footprint is wrong. Now, I can't be wrong in saying that because that's what the IPCC has told the rest of the world. That's what we've signed up to in this country, and 190 other countries around the world have also signed up to this. We signed up to a limit of 1.5 degree rises since pre-industrial levels. And it's true, many so-called green conservatives have allowed this to simply slip. Liz Truss, for example, set out a trade deal with the Australians, which removed, deleted, excluded the 1.5 degree target. And it's that kind of thinking that allows people like Amber to turn around and say, we can carry on investing in new fossil fuel projects. We can't. It's wrong.
OK, so no new oil and gas projects. Amber, would you back that?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, would you rather be buying in Russian gas, because we're still using gas, or would you rather have gas from the North Sea? I would rather have gas from the North Sea. It's a more honest approach and it improves our energy security. So I don't agree with Chidi on that. But what I do agree is that ultimately we need to get rid of gas. But in the meantime, we have to be franker with people that it is a necessary transition to get to net zero. And I would just point out to him too, is that 1.5 is absolutely the aim. But the Paris Agreement was always for 2 degrees. And it's good that we've increased that ambition. And this is only going to go in one direction, which is more ambition, more innovation, and lower carbon emissions. But we have to make sure we keep the energy flowing in the meantime.
We've only got about 20 seconds, Chidi, but I want you to get your chance to come back at that.
Asserting that gas is a transition fuel is a bit like showing up at an AA meeting and congratulating people for being off the whiskey, and handing them a huge crate of wine and congratulating them. No, gas is not a transition fuel.
OK, I think we can say you'll have to agree to disagree for tonight. No doubt we will revisit this issue another time. But Chidi, Oti-Obihara and Amber Rudd, thank you both very much indeed for your time tonight.
Thank you.
And that's everything from us for today. On tomorrow's show, I'll be joined by climate justice activist Days Ajayi and Bruce Nilles, Director of Climate Imperative. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.